Welcome everyone to another episode of the Ol'Timers comic book show, my favorite hour of the whole week. Joining me as always, it is the Professor.
Hey, Johnny.
Hey.
What's up?
Hey man, how's it going?
It's going well.
Yeah, you've got some lucky place to go next week, I hear.
I do. My wife won me tickets to Tom Brady's retirement, so I'm going.
To Tampa?
No. It's here. I believe they sold out Gillette Stadium for a,
Tampa fans?
a retirement party. Yeah, no, it's messed up. We're gonna give them a good send off. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what they're gonna do, but it's gonna be fun.
I wonder how many members of the Birmingham City soccer team are going to be there. That's a different kettle of fish. And of course, it wouldn't be Ol'Timers if it wasn't for the 13th Crusader.
Yo.
Yo, buenos dias, senor.
Buenos dias.
I'm heading to Ibiza in a month's time, so I really need some extra tips, clean tips.
I'll work on it.
Muchas gracias. All right, we're here this time around. We kind of touched on this subject last time when we kind of expanded this time around. And we're talking about Dark Horse Comics and somehow by default also John Byrne. So there we go. So Dark Horse Comics, they were I suppose they were the third wheel of comic books for quite some time, Professor.
Well, yeah. I mean, Dark Horse comes on the scene in 1986, and kind of takes the industry by storm a little bit, right? They're doing things a little bit different than anybody's done it. They're basically Image before Image was Image, right? Yeah. So Mike Richardson, who founded Dark Horse, creates this. He creates because he was disillusioned. Do you know Mike Richardson was actually a retailer?
Yeah.
He owned us in Oregon. He owned
My High Comics, was it not? No.
Was
that the other one?
No. It's hold on. I'll find out the name of the place. It's it was called. It was Jesus Christ. Sorry.
It's all right.
Is that what it was called?
Things from Another World. That was the place it was called. Things from Another World. So he opens the retail store, and he's disillusioned with the product. He's disillusioned with Marvel and DC, and he's trying to write his own stuff. So he ends up, not being able to do that. So instead, he opens his own publishing company and hires people to do stuff. So, and that basically. He was allowing creators to come in and create and own their products, and end up marketing and publishing themselves. And that's really kind of how Dark Horse really kind of put its mark on the map.
Yeah.
On top of the licensing stuff.
I was just about to say, 13th licensing was a key part for them in the early go to get some funds through the door. I remember reading the Aliens versus Predator stuff from Dark Horse. And that was massive for ages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty much everything that Bud said. A lot of people think that the independence was an Image thing. It certainly was not. It's been this way for many, many, many years. Going back even into the 50s, like all these creators had ideas and some of them were just never met the time of day to get across the publisher's desk for approval. But it didn't mean the ideas went away.
Yeah.
And then you just happen to have, by circumstance, in this specific instance with Dark Horse, where someone was like, hey, you know what? Enough is enough. Why don't we just start something? And they lived up to their name, the Dark Horse.
I think when I think of Dark Horse, I automatically think of things like Aliens versus Predator, the Star Wars stuff, which we've talked about before on the show. Yeah. But at one point, Dark Horse was the most successful, and it's still pretty damn successful, of transferring comic books into TV and movie products. When you think back, you've got The Mask. Everybody loves that, right? There's a whole bar in Cancun based on the damn thing. Practically.
I did not know that.
If you go to a Coco Bongo, you are greeted by a mask in the big yellow suit and the green face, and they do dances and stuff. And yeah, it's crazy. It's Coco. Um, what else was I going to say? Of course, you've got the Umbrella Society over on Netflix. That's now. So you think back when the mask came out.
Mm-hmm.
Now Umbrella, there's loads of stuff in between. Time Cop. We forget how much of a star Jean-Claude Van Damme was.
Yep.
Back in the late 80s, early 90s.
That to me, it shows like they had Jim Carrey, who at the time was not, he was like the most bankable star in America at that time. He had his Ace Ventura came on and he just was like exploded. And then The Mask comes out, and even though The Mask could have been better, but they also had who was Cameron Diaz was in there too, right?
Cameron Diaz with
that was her
and
coming out party.
Wow,
too,
what a
right?
party! What a party!
Yeah. And to see this is what for the next 20 years, every time you see some kind of science fiction or weird ass property being made into a movie, you have to look twice to see if Dark Horse was Dark Horse. This was a comic book property, and then it was like, of course it's a comic book property, and it is from Dark Horse.
Yeah. Cool.
So it was interesting.
I look at it too from this perspective of which creators ended up lending their talents over to this publisher during that time and beyond. So, for example, Cover Your Ears Machine, right? Matt Wagner's Grendel. Then you have Hellboy, things like that, which kind of still is running pretty strong to these days.
Sin City.
Sin City as well. So, there's some big creators behind some of the projects that ended up going through the halls of Dark Horse Comics.
I think for me, and I know the we'll talk about the marketing structure before I finish that last phrase off. The idea behind the publishing format of Dark Horse, I think, is a stroke of genius. And I think it's only starting to seep through to some of the bigger publishers. They go with a mini series, and they don't. That's all you get. You get 6 issues, 4 to 6 issues of any given story, and then it stops for 18 months, and then you get another 6 issues. So if you do it right, you get that captive audience for 6 months. And then you create that bubble of interest, and people have to have it. Even now, Hellboy comes out in one shots. It's not an ongoing series. And Hellboy in the Magnoliverse is probably the biggest attraction you've got with Dark Horse at the moment. How do you guys feel about the miniseries product? Does that work? Do you think? I mean, why aren't other publishers using it? Just think of how many naff fill-in issues we could avoid if we had Amazing Spider-Man 6 times a year instead of 18.
But that's kind of what they do now, isn't it? I mean, you get the 6 or 12 issues or 20 or 30, and then it's rebooted for the next creative team, right? Maybe. I mean, even though you may be having like some longer story arcs, I think Marvel and DC for the most part have kind of adapted that model, because Dark Horse was basically writing for the trade before everybody else was, right?
So I suppose what I'm saying is, why would we, if it's so popular, if Batman's so popular, for example, he could afford to take 6 months of the year off. DC could take 6 months off of publishing Batman books, spend 6 months trying to push some other products, some other characters, and then in 6 months' time, when Batman restarts again, the pressure and the desire to have it would send it through the charts again, surely.
I think that's a very loaded question that you asked, Machine, only because with the big two, right, it came the advent of limited series that people got familiar with and things like that. But then ironically, you get independent people coming up with, hey, that's the format we're going to go with. But the one thing that you have to consider is who's the creator involved, how much of an arc do they have, and beyond. Maybe some of these things weren't totally fleshed out because they were not tested in the market yet. So I look at it as a 1 foot in, 1 foot out strategy. And if you're going to put both feet in, then it has to be pretty good. So this answers why there weren't that many long lasting, consistent runs, like 30-issue runs within Dark Horse. It's got to be pretty damn good for them to invest in something like that to continue it.
I kind of agree and disagree with you on this one. I think if we look at if we look at Next Men, which we're going to look at as our first book in a little bit, I'm sure there's more than 30 issues of that. And I'm sure there's more than 30 issues of Aliens versus Predator in the various miniseries. So,
yeah, my answer to that is that you gotta consider the era that they were in. When we talk about Next Men, you're talking about a period of comics that had a lull.
yeah,
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The times are different. The creators, it's all about the time and place. Like in today's world, everybody's kind of used to that limited series format, and even if it's an ongoing run, to Bud's point, right, you're getting a story arc, and then lo and behold, it's a whole new creative team. So I still think that we have to seriously consider the time and place.
It's a really great point you make. Absolutely. For me, I used to love Dark Horse, and I still like a lot of the stuff they do that's a little bit off the wall. For me, the wheels fell off. The wheels fell off when they tried to do the Legend series, and they had the X character, and they had this, and they tried to do superheroes. And I'm thinking to myself, you guys aren't a superhero publisher. Stop doing superheroes and get back to doing something that's interesting and different. That's when I kind of like, right, I'm done.
Yeah, I agree with that, because when Dark Horse came out, they were trying to do a superhero universe. It just never blended at maybe the way that they wanted it to. But nowadays, they could throw all that out the window and say, look, we'll give you a little superhero stuff, but don't expect it to go on as long as Detective Comics, because we're gonna trot out other new and unique ideas. And I think that's what makes Dark Horse successful, is their versatility.
That's a good shout. So the difference between Dark Horse and Image is, of course, the superstardomness of the people and how they left Marvel to set up Image. Whereas the Dark Horse guys were kind of doing Image on the side, right? In some ways.
So the reason that the bigger creators were leaving Marvel and DC and taking their projects over to Dark Horse. Well, first of all, Image didn't exist back then, but the ability for them to steer their creations, own their creations, and be able to maybe get their feet wet in self-publishing almost was very appealing to the Frank Millers of the Sin City, and your John Byrnes, and many other A-list creators that went over to Dark Horse in the late 80s. So this, and let's not forget, we're talking. We did talk about licensed products and everything, but Dark Horse was publishing manga in the 80s before anybody else, and manga is arguably bigger than Marvel and DC now. As far as bringing in younger readers, I know that this is the Ol'Timers comic book show, but we're not talking manga. But my kid reads more manga than superhero stuff. So
cool, excellent. All right, so should we get the first book going then? It is a little bit of an FU to Marvel, maybe. Let's find out.
Yeah.
This is John Byrne's Next Men. We are starting with issue number 1 from February 92. It's not an expensive book. You can get this on eBay in the UK for around £4. Watch those grades. And go collect, have a grade 9 at $18. So it's not a massive book. When you do look for this book, please note where there is blue on this cover, the first print is red. There you go. Lucas would be pleased with me bringing out the variants. What can I say? We are using the comic from the trade, which has shed loads of John Byrne stuff in, but we're focused on with this. So it's written, as it says, it's John Byrne's Next Men. Written by John Byrne, art by John Byrne, colors by Matt Webb, letters. There's not a letter accredited, which is a damn shame considering there's so much writing in the damn thing. That's a lot of reading. Hands up if you tried to work out which next man was an X-Man. I did that. Professor, is this your choice? No.
It was. I think last episode we might have mentioned Next Men, and so this actually gave us the idea for this whole episode. So that's why I picked this one. John Byrne's Next Men actually was the first Dark Horse comic. I actually followed John Byrne from Marvel over to Dark Horse because I was like, hey, I was a huge John Byrne fan, and this was where John Byrne was, so this is what I was buying, and I had no idea what it was going to be about, except for, the name of the book really says it all, right? This was really, it was John Byrne's idea of what X-Men should have been, or what could have been, or what he probably may have done when, if he stayed on X-Men. I thought this book, now, if I was smarter and remembered my John Byrne's Next Men history, I would have picked to review issue 0 as opposed to issue 1, because this book actually starts at 0, and then this is actually the second issue. So that did you bother reading issue 0?
No. I thought issue 0 was like a throwback after issue 1 come out.
No, issue 0 is actually the beginning of the story, and this first page. I mean, you here you don't know about the characters. The characters are all busting out of this facility. The biggest problem I have with this issue, because I'm not going to say it's good, because it really kind of is not, unless you spend a lot of time getting into the storyline. So this first issue really is set up, and basically trying to get you to understand or make you feel as disoriented and confused as the rest of the characters in this book, because they don't know what's going on either. It's, I feel like there's not enough effort right at the beginning to separate the characters. They're all very generic. They're all dressed the same. They're all got their shaved heads. They all look different. They all look the same. So it was kind of confusing when they jumping from character to character, trying to keep them all straight. They obviously, the one things that separate them is they each have different powers. You don't quite know what they have, their powers, where their powers came from. It felt very Matrixy. If you read the 0 issue, they were all in this little fantasy world doing what they do, and then they got unplugged, right? And now here they are in the real world, and they have no idea. They, even when they were in the Matrix world, they're saying, oh, I know I can read, but I never remember learning how to read. We've never been to school, but we are educated and we know things. And then, that they spend a few pages doing that, and then they figure out, then they get unplugged, and now they're, they don't know where they are. They don't know what America is. They don't know what language they're speaking. They even said, and they're like, I'm speaking the same language you are, or I can understand this same language, but they didn't know it was English. So to me, there was some interesting things here. John Byrne's always into the government subterfuge and stuff going on where, he's not really quite revealing yet. But, if you're a John Byrne fan, the art's John Byrne. The writing's very John Byrne, like you said, lots of words. I think that he was allowed to go places that he wasn't allowed to do in Marvel. The violence is a little more graphic. The language is a little more blue. There's a little more sex, drugs, and rock and roll in this issue. For me, I do remember actually growing to quite like the series. But the first issue, and if you don't read, of course, if you didn't read the 0 issue, I don't know what you're doing, because the first issue you're not going to understand at all. Even though the 0 issue was kind of a bit, the character, the police character, the black woman that rescues them from the facility, you have no idea what she's doing there. She shows up there and she breaks them out, and you still after the second issue have no idea what the heck she's there for, what she is, who she is, what she's doing. So it's interesting. The power of John Byrne keeps me coming back for more. But other than that, it is I mean, he's actually come out and said this is I started out trying to do X-Men, and it turned into its own thing. So, and he said the same thing about the next book that we're going to talk about.
Cool. All right, fair enough. 13. Were you a Next Men fan?
I'm gonna say I became one, but again, much like what Bud said, John Byrne was definitely huge in the '80s, and a lot of people around this time in comics were like, "Hey, why not? We know who John Byrne is by now." People tend to forget that there was a comic called Dark Horse Presents, which was I kind of look at as a primer, which is where this team actually showed up, and that was actually the contents of issue 0. So, but if it makes you feel better, I did read issue 0,
yes,
and things like that, and then getting ready for issue 1 here. Congratulations, Machine. So the thing with the Next Men, right? Bud nailed it right on the head. Where John Byrne had the experience on working with X-Men, he had the experience with Marvel working on Fantastic Four, among other projects, lending his art talent, and then in some cases writing stuff for them. So why not? If you're Dark Horse Comics, you're like, John Byrne, you want to come here? Yeah, okay, why not? If this is what you're bringing, then we'll take it. Why not? I just think with this particular series, right, you can't judge the series based on one chapter. You just can't do it, because John Byrne, it appears to me with the Next Men that, to Bud's point, he had an idea. He was like, I'm going to make the X-Men unfiltered, and now it's going to turn into a different story, and it really does turn into something completely different. So as with any issue number 1, you're debuting a cast of characters that you're trying to sell to the public to get invested in. I think I'm going to say it's kind of a middle of the road here. And my advice to the audience is to be a little patient. I think you will have that payoff as far as the story is concerned. As far as the art is concerned, it is John Byrne art. So as I said earlier, when you have to consider the time and the place, right? Where else would you get your John Byrne fix at this time? You wouldn't. So you would be coming here. So you have all of these things aligned, right? As a reader back then, why wouldn't you follow John Byrne? Now I'm getting out of the big 2, and I'm going to give it a chance. If you have an open mind, you would have given this book a chance. And again, you can't judge it by the first chapter. I think as far as the first story is concerned, like I said, it is a little bit of an investment. It is very Matrixy before the Matrix, and that right away kind of differentiates it from the X-Men. I think the government, the big government, always doing something behind the scenes that nobody knows about, experimenting on kids that didn't even know that they were captured. That's different than X-Men that people would have been familiar with at this point in time. As the series continues, to kind of give a little preview, this gets very adult with each passing issue. So I think for this time, I would have invested in this with no question. So those are my thoughts on that.
Cool. I was actually in the comic book business when this came out. I was selling comic books in the northeast of UK, and there was people who were queuing for this book. They loved it. They thought it was the next best thing since whenever. And somewhere along the line, it died off super quick. I don't know what happened.
I think it was a timing, a schedule thing.
Yeah,
I think that there was too much delay between issues. I remember that happening to me, and there was a lot of that going around back in the late '80s. Was you weren't able to find the book when it came out, and this wasn't the only one. I think it was industry wide.
Yeah.
And you guys knew that, growing up in New York, I was very fortunate to have a lot of shops around me that carried a whole wide range of books. But the question is, which shop would I go to get something like this? So it was never consistent. One day I would go to a shop and I would see this kind of, I don't know, Comico books. Oh, I'm going to go there next time I want a Comico book. Now I go the next time, it's not there. So the same thing is true with Dark Horse, where the collectability of it was kind of a challenge for the collectors to rely on a retailer to consistently provide the book for them.
That's an interesting shout, definitely.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right. It the interest just. For me, I think Byrne tries too hard to show Chris Claremont that he's better than Chris Claremont, and in doing so falls into some very Chris Claremont hints and tricks, and I'm like, I can't differentiate. The art is the art. It's classic John Byrne. Although I will say this: there's a character. Where is he? Where him? This guy. This guy in the second issue appears as an orderly, a paramedic. It's like, what's going on? Maybe that's his secret power. I don't know.
There were a few panels in here I thought looked rushed.
Yeah, it is a little bit over-explanatory. There's a lot of exposition to wade through. It is an issue 1, so that kind of goes with the territory, especially if you haven't read issue 0, like some people. That's me. But still, the book, I always found when I was selling this book, people were interested in the Jazz character more than anything. And she became like the de facto icon for this book. Is that right for you guys across the pond? Because that's how I saw it over here. I don't know if that's.
I'm gonna say, just like I said at the beginning of this book, I had trouble telling them apart. So, okay. Especially rereading this after 25 years, 30 years. The first issue did nothing to me to differentiate one character from another.
Okay, cool.
So
the way these characters came across to me were that they were expendable.
Yeah.
And
yes.
You know, when they're going through the greenery, which is the pretend world that their minds were in, you see so many of them that had fallen. So the first thing that hit me was like, man, how long are they going to be alive for? So I didn't look for that character to step out, or overshadow any of the others. I'm just worried about, from a reader perspective, who's going to live.
Yeah. Cool. The colours seem dark on this. I don't know if it's the fact that we're reading it on a trade or if we're reading it digitally. It just looks dark. And that comes the same for the next book down the line as well. I think if you're a John Byrne fan, you should love this book. It is a slow burner. I think we can all agree on that.
I have a question, and I'm not sure if about the answer, and I don't know if you know either. I seem to remember that the original X-Men comics coming out from Dark Horse were in black and white. Were these recolored for classic X-Men? They were colored. Yes. Okay.
There you go.
I remember my copies buying them. I'm like, they were black and white as far as I know.
Okay, cool. So, okay, cool. Excellent. Good question. Good answer. Time for a break for one of our other shows. Where should we go? You know what? We haven't had this for a while. It's K-Pop Cosmos. There you have it, K-Pop Cosmos for everything that is K-pop, music, style, fashion, and of course the lovely Freya. What more can you want? What more could you want? All right, our next book in our Dark Horse review is another Byrne book. We've already had the X-Men of Dark Horse. Now it's time for the Fantastic Four. Is that what we're saying this is? Days Unlimited #1 from January 94. On eBay, you can buy issues 1 through 3 for a total, all 3, for £1.95. Wow, that's impressive. Go collect. There is no price listed. Therefore, go collecting. This book is priceless. Maybe not quite that. I'm not sure. Written by John Byrne, art by John Byrne, colors by Matt Webb. Who picked this?
You did.
I didn't pick this. I picked the last one. Who picked this?
13.
Was this your pick?
Yes.
Yes. Why did you go with this book?
Why not?
Exactly. Go on then. Tell us all about this.
Yeah. So again, for during this time in comic books, right? I feel like if you put yourself back in this era, for those of us that were around during this time, there were a lot of things going on with comics. All of a sudden, you start getting more competition, more aggressiveness, more ideas being trotted out. It was almost as if taking something and throwing it at the wall to see if it would stick. So why not with this? From John Byrne's perspective in Dark Horse. So as we just mentioned with Next Men, here's another project from John Byrne with Danger Unlimited. At this point, the way that that I take this in, it seems as if John Byrne was trying to establish a universe within Dark Horse, but also a John Byrne verse in Dark Horse. If that makes any sense. As far as like a Fantastic Four, I think as far as the way I see it, Fantastic Four was just kind of the mold. But I think that the plot here was definitely different than Fantastic Four. There's some similarities, but I'm going to say some. Other than that, there are some things that are different in here. And just like Next Men, John Byrne's mission here was, well, I'm going to have this idea. Let me try to write a quartet of heroes. Since no one else is doing an FF book, I might as well do it. But I think when he set out to do that, this thing became organic and a thing of its own. And if you read all 4 issues of Danger Unlimited, you will clearly see that it is not a Fantastic Four book. Again, as we said with the art, it's John Byrne. So if you're a big fan of John Byrne, particularly from the 80s, now you're here in the 90s, and you still can get your John Byrne fix on a new project. The title right away is like the Phoenix Agenda. It felt deliberate. But yeah, but I felt the art in here, I'm going to start there, versus the Next Men was a little bit better, in my opinion, at least for the first issue. I felt like he took a little bit more time to flesh this book out than he did in Next Men. That's my opinion on that. But again, it's still what you would expect from John Byrne for his artwork. As far as the story is concerned, where it differentiates from the Fantastic Four, we're all accustomed to reading Fantastic Four books with them being explorers, going into various universes and realities. Whereas in Danger Unlimited, John Byrne is taking you on a timeline journey. So that is the huge difference between this and FF, in my opinion. But he'll introduce you to some characters in here, particularly Thermal, Calvin Carson, if I'm not mistaken, is his real name. And
Cave Carson? Oh no, Calvin.
Calvin, yeah, Calvin Carson. Yeah, okay. So basically he's kind of the equivalent to a Human Torch, where except that he can not only generate heat, he could also generate cold. But he awakens in the future. And as I was saying earlier, that's one of the major differences here. So what's happening in the future? What's happening on this Earth is that the Earth was overtaken by an alien race whose name I can't pronounce, nor am I going to attempt to pronounce. But then then they reached a treaty to coexist. But with it comes a human race that's like, man, we had no choice but to take this deal. Some humans benefited, others didn't. But what came to an end in this universe were superheroes. And I think that's where the timeline for this particular story is very important. I think it's a strong plot by Byrne, which unfortunately he couldn't really see through to the end. This thing only lasted 4 issues. And my recollection of the 90s was like, man, there's so many books to choose from. I don't know what to pick. But how about for the creators? They may be getting some offers here and there, and it's like, crap, I'm going to take this. I'm going to work on that. So I think that Danger Unlimited, I kind of wish that it would be resurrected this day and age, because I think this plot was strong enough to be more than 4 issues. So again, you can't judge a run by the first issue or the first chapter, but
Fair
this
enough.
was really a timeline adventure from Byrne. The backstory of this issue features a character called the Torch of Liberty, which is obviously a strong Captain America reference and character. But this is an example of this Earth and introducing a villain in here that Danger Unlimited had encountered. You won't know any of that here unless you read all 4 issues. But it's again
Sorry.
Byrne messing with the timeline and establishing a universe here.
Cool. Cool.
Oh yeah.
Nick?
So what I want to say real quick, I'm sorry. I felt like this had Watchmen elements in it as well, because if you go later in the series, they're talking about Danger Unlimited, a superhero team that existed before this future story. So you have to go back into the past and pluck stories from them to know about them, and while he's establishing a new Danger Unlimited. So there's a lot of moving pieces with this plan that John Byrne had, but unfortunately didn't see anything past issue 4.
Is it safe to say, Professor, that John Byrne's star was on the decline at this point? I mean, he'd left the Fantastic Four, he'd left X-Men, She-Hulk had been stopped or cancelled, or he'd left that. Namor, the Submariner, was repurposed, retooled, and that was going down the toilet, belly up, as most fish do at some point. Is it?
Let's not forget he did Superman as well, the Man of Steel. He was instrumental in that in DC. So
I mean, unfortunately, with Byrne, I mean, I think we all know that his reputation far precedes him. So he's not and I don't know John Byrne, so but from what I understand, he's not the greatest person to get along with and the greatest person to do business with, and he's not that not that relationships aren't his strong point, let's say. Okay. So just from hearing stories from several people that actually do know him, that considered him a friend, that they don't have any communication with him anymore because John Byrne chooses not to. So
is it safe to say it's unlimited danger?
Yeah. So that's I mean, I think with his career, I mean, he's still got. If you guys follow him on ByrneRobotics.com, he's still producing artwork. He's actually got his own underground X-Men comic going on, where he continues his run from when he left the book back in the 80s. He continues that run as if it was as if it never ended, and it's actually interesting. But to be able to say, John Byrne, who should have a lifetime ticket to be able to, create and publish whatever he wants as a creator,
and
whenever, correct. To not have the ability or the connections in the industry, let's say, to do that. I think it's shocking. I would buy anything Byrne published today. And it's, to me, it's disappointing, because this is when I think of my comic book my love for comics. It's art like John Byrne's that I come back to, and that I love to. I could sit here and look at this all day. So to me, it's amazing because he hasn't literally worked in the industry in like 30 years. So it's disappointing to me.
It's definitely an old-timer thing there, guys.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
This is what we grew up with, and we didn't know the behind the scenes then, like the way we do now.
That's a good call.
Yep.
Art-wise, hey, look, there's Jazz from the Next Men in this book. Who would have thunk that?
Yeah.
No.
There we go.
It isn't, Jazz. I'm just being
No, I know.
I do like how her leg starts and the waist starts there in the chest. There's something iffy about that picture. Just proportion just doesn't work for me. And I think that's probably what I think about this book, to be honest. This book, let me just get the dates. This book came out 2 years after Next Men. And if you thought Next Men art looked rushed, I think this looks rushed. I don't get the cohesiveness of this at all. I read this and it was just noise. I felt it was just noise. Why am I reading a makeup of yet another team when I could be reading about a team I already know? You know? And as much as we can say that John Byrne was fantastic on Fantastic Four, let's not forget that when his work on Fantastic Four, he was standing on the shoulders of the greatness of Lee and Kirby. That as his foundation. This is all Byrne. And I'm not sure that the idea works as well as the Fantastic Four. And I get what you're saying, that it transmogrifies into something else down the line. That may be so. There's nothing in this book that made me think, oh, I'm really interested to see what's happening in number 2. The next book, Next Men comic we looked at earlier, we were, thanks to 13, we had the whole run. And I read the whole run. I was like, right, what's going on? Boom, 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 boom. You know, this, I'm like, I can just take it or leave it. You know, and I don't know if by 94, I don't know if John Byrne's narrative style was still working in comics. I think comics had moved on from there. If you consider 94's After Image, art uber alles, it was good to take another couple of years, maybe 5 years even, for the idea that writing comic books was just equally as important as the pretty pictures. So I think someone mentioned it before, being out of time. I think again the editor schedule thing. I just don't think this book works well for when it was produced. Give it 5 years later, and you might find it's everyone's back into it again. I don't know. There was just so much product out there at the time in 94. There was so much product. You couldn't buy everything. And I don't think I knew anybody who bought this.
Well, yeah, and these books were a little pricier than everything else on the stands too.
Yeah.
I think I saw, what was the cover price, like $2.50?
$2.
$2, is it?
Yeah, so I mean $2. Everything else that Marvel was still publishing was like $1.50. So
yeah, back then the approach was, man, if I'm spending $2, it better be gold.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
I think on this one it's a bronze, not a gold.
And it's worth mentioning that the Torch of Liberty backup in this issue was drawn by Karen Dwyer, and Karen Dwyer is actually John Byrne's stepson.
Yeah.
So they kept it in the family.
Nepotism.
Yeah.
Nepotism again. The whole family can play. All right. Okay. Our last book is a true Dark Horse classic. I had, for some reason or another, I had this character as a trade paperback. I think I must have had it later in the run, and where the art was a lot cleaner, and I absolutely adored it. Absolutely loved this book. Looking at issue 1, I'm kind of thinking, how did it manage to survive? I'm not going to lie. I was a little bit like, what? This isn't what I remember. But, in for a penny, in for a pound and all that. We're talking about Paul Chadwick's Concrete. This is from February 87, so it's our oldest book on show. eBay, I could not find a price for this one, although various issues go for some crazy prices. Go collect, have a grade 9 at retail at $38. We have Paul Chadwick on art and writing. And this time we have a letterer, Bill Spicer, but we have no colorists because it's black and white. So, how best to describe Concrete? Well, Concrete is this dude. All right, that's how it works. These are the cast of his characters that foment his uh, family of sorts, his cast, his crew. You've got the unrequited love interest. You've got his man Friday. You've got the sleazoid who's trying to use him for his own nefarious um, deeds. You've got other people involved who's also have nefarious deeds going on. And you have John McGee. Sorry, not John McGee, Tony, the reporter who is chasing the story.
Let me cross that off my notes because that's what I had.
Oh, John McGee.
Yeah.
Don't make me angry, Mr. McGee. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
No, you made me angry now because you took my line.
Sorry, mate. Sorry. So reading this book, it's kind of what struck me was how apt it is for our social media frenzied world. You know, I was like, how back in '87 there was no social media, there was no Facebook, and yet this book is a full-out press telling you how great concrete is, and there's even dialogue in here, sort of like having a backlash against the popularity of the character, the celebrity, as it were. And I thought that was so coincidental and yet so bang on to see that, because we see that reflected in today's social media left, right, and center. In black and white art, it is simple lines. The issue serves to set every piece in motion. You've got Concrete, who needs a man Friday to help him do the regular stuff. He's got a scientist, not girlfriend. I love how he has to sit on bricks. That's cool. These art pictures come into play later in the various issues. And he just wants to do good deeds for people. He's a little bit morose, or he does get morose. There are elements of reality in this, and that sounds stupid when you talk about a rock dude, but you talk about he can hold his breath for an hour. Yeah, he manages to survive longer for that. How to do that? Well, it's explained. It's not just with. He's a big rock, so if he falls from a height, he'll break. If he falls in the sea, he'll sink. It's a rock. That's it. No ifs, no buts, no magic powers. It's a rock. Apart from great heights, I suppose. And it's the interactions, it's his limitations supported by his friends that make the book interesting. And of course, he gets himself in all sorts of scrapes down the line. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought this was a blast from the past. There's the social media element. There's the naivety of trying to do a good thing. There's the idea that no good deed goes unpunished. And of course, you've got the smarmy man Friday type who's kind of trying to hit on every girl because she's writing a story about a depressive who's got mayonnaise in the fridge, and that's it. I agree with 13th on this. Is it's hard to judge a series by one book, although we do it every other week, it seems. But from small pebbles, the concretes grow. Maybe this book was huge. This character was huge for ages. And this is just a prime example of what Dark Horse could do, moving away from superheroes and moving away from tie-in stuff. There you go. Cool. I suppose I better go to 13th next to make up for nicking his line. Go on, 13.
What a pal. I thought this was a pretty solid book.
Yeah.
And
rock solid.
Yeah, rock solid. And for those that don't think that's your own asphalt.
Hey! I have to say that has been your best joke, best joke time on.
This is what I love about going back in time and just saying like, hey, what's this? Even back then, if you were there and lucky enough to have collected comics like we did back in this era, but there you can't get them all, as Machine said earlier, but one day or another, maybe you'll get a chance with, hey, I remember overlooking this book, and then you just pick it up and then try to read it. And I think if you look at it from that lens, I think what you'll find is a story that has elements of everyday life and comics at the same time. So from what I understand, the main character, Ron Lithgow here, his brain was taken by aliens, and his brain implanted in a concrete body.
Correct.
Now he has to live with that. Now this is a story of his life, but the problem is that his life is very, very public, but behind the scenes, as the reader, you get to see who he really is. And he's surrounded by characters where initially, at least reading from this first issue, you're trying to distinguish loyalty, and you're trying to distinguish who's there to kind of work against him. So you have that plot, and these are everyday things that people go through with who to establish trust with and whatever. But more importantly, I think it's also kind of comical, where the guy is just a rock. Like, what do you expect him to do? Other than if you pick up a rock and put it somewhere else, he's going to break something. So, yeah, I mean, this is where independent publishers, especially in the 80s, a lot of things got, I would say, overlooked because they were overshadowed by the big two. Now, herein lies a creation that did last a few issues, and it doesn't really get the light of day too often in today's world. Not many people will remember something like this, and that's one of the basis for what we do this show for.
Definitely.
But getting into the story, I think it was a very fleshed out story for an issue one, for a guy whose sole power is trying to remain human in a rock body. He wants to do the right things. He doesn't mind the press coverage. He just wants to do something within his abilities. But I think the behind the scenes things with the people he surrounds himself with is where the drama comes in. You have the government involved. You have other people with different ambitions. I like I said, I think this story has, the story itself is you wouldn't expect something like this. It's such a simple plot, but yet a very fleshed out story. The artwork, it does its job. My only regret, I guess, with reading this book is I kind of wish it was in color, but who cares? Whatever. You buy comics to read the story, so that's my only gripe with this book. But otherwise, it's a pretty solid book.
All right. Excellent. Good call. Thank you very much. The last word goes to the professor.
I don't know how much more I could add to this book because you guys said it so succinctly, but I was just, when I was reading this, I was like, where the hell is my Netflix concrete TV show? Because there's a lot of stuff going on here in this first issue that I was like, wow, so these characters could exist today. This is this concrete with the a speechwriter for a politician. I've never seen that was his previous job before he was replaced in his brain in a rock body, but he's still got the brain of a speechwriter. So the kind of like a good reflection on the writer actually writing himself, right? And the politician who's a conflicted nice guy, but he's doing things for bad people because he owes them favors. I'm like, that's what more slice of life right now is that? And then of course you have the reporter who's after the story. You have the scientist that is studying concrete but is actually secretly in love with him. And
it's the other way around. I think he fancies her. She doesn't know anything about the emotional aspect.
Well, okay, so maybe I kind of thought that they were sweet on each other in that first issue, but maybe I didn't read past that. And then of course you had the Man Friday that he gets hired to do the job. And to me, it's I thought I loved all the characters. I thought it was super interesting, and I'm surprised that this is the first time I've ever read it. And I absolutely loved this book from start to finish, and I thought that concrete was for a rock character, very human.
And that's the hook for the book. It's very good. Well done.
Yeah, I think it's unfair when we look at independent publishers, and if you're just glancing at a book like this at the Stands or any of the other ones we cover, that the first thing that comes to mind is how do we compare it to Marvel and DC? Well, concrete is probably your proof of why you shouldn't do that.
Agreed.
You know, you can look at the cover of this book and think it's like, oh, you know, it's a Ben Grimm / Hulk combination, and you know, dealing with being deformed amongst human in society, and then things like that. But it really is, and I think it's like I said, it's a very underrated book, and that should really get more attention.
Cool. There you go. Excellent. Well, a great book to end on. Well done. Excellent. They have 3 up, 3 down. Bit of a celebration of Dark Horse Comics. Who knows where we'll be next time around? But I'm sure that I will be there, the Professor will be there, and the 13th Crusader will be there to walk you through some more books that are of its time. There we go. Gentlemen, thank you so much for spending the time. I appreciate it as always.
Of course.
Thank you.
To me, my next men. Don't forget. Was that the only line that Byrne was missing in that book?
Pretty much. What was I going to say? Don't forget to check out the new CPN for all your favorite shows, including 13th.
The Definitive Crusade, where it is discussed all of the recent DC comic releases.
That's discussed with 2 S's, not with a T.
DIGUST. Not just playing.
And of course, you can check out No Prize Professor. Be on hiatus at the moment. Looking to retool.
We're going to retool that show.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah. So we'll have a new version of the No Prize podcast coming soon. There you go. What can I say? It's all great. And of course, if you'd like to hear about how books like Concrete come to life, you can always check out Outside the Panels, where we interview creators from all walks of life across Marvel, DC, and their independents. It's all there for you on the UCPN. Great. Gents, I will let you go on with the rest of your day. It's been an absolute pleasure. Still my favorite hour of the week.
Thank you, Johnny. It's mine as well.
Thank you.
All that's left to say is I've been your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes. As always, adios.